Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures Weekly Chart Analysis for the week ending 12th of September 2025. The first chart is the US Dollar Index Futures, which closed slightly lower this week. Price continues to trade within the range of this up bar, which closed well off its highs, and is trading in consolidation mode, roughly sideways. There's no impetus to move lower at the moment, but on the other hand, there's no intent on moving higher either. Volume increased to above the average this week, but price continued to trade within the range of the previous bar and within the range of this up bar in the background. There continues to be sufficient demand in this market to sustain its position and avoid a breakdown. It certainly appears weaker than it's trading, but it continues to maintain its position sideways at this point. It looks vulnerable. It hasn't broken down. The next chart is the E-mini S&P. This is S&P 500 Index Futures, which closed higher this week. Volume remained about average. It was genuine trading. Price closed above the recent highs. Spread was not particularly wide and possibly a little below the average. So the market really wasn't moving freely. And it does suggest there may be some supply in the market. So just be a little careful here. The market does appear to want to go higher, but there wasn't any great intent in the trading this week. The market moved up steadily in a grinding fashion. US Treasury 10-year note futures. They attempted to go higher earlier in the week and move above the previous bar's high, but this wasn't broadly supported in the market. So instead, the market came back and it's attempting to consolidate right up high in this up bar's range. At this point, it does appear strong, but the period of consolidation is not yet complete. The higher up within the range the consolidation takes place, the stronger the market generally. So it's making a pretty good attempt to consolidate right up high in the range of the previous up bar. And you could actually say the range begins right down there. And there's your little flag forming to some extent. Volume was reduced this week, about average. So it was genuine trading. And the fact the market held on right up high in the range is a positive. Overall, the market remains within the range of this widespread down bar. And at this point, it may be this market remains within that bar's range for a little longer. Copper price futures. Copper price futures closed higher this week. This was the first attempt to move higher we've seen for a while. All the previous trading's been adjacent to this previous support level. And the market's just edged a little higher this week. Whether it's sustainable, we'll have to wait and see. Spread was not wide, but volume was low and below the average. At this point, the market's just floated a little higher, mostly on the lack of selling pressure in the market. Gold price futures. Gold price futures closed higher this week. Spread was reduced over the previous bar, but volume remained pretty strong, just a fraction above the average. So there's probably a little supply in the market this week, and the close off the high probably helps to confirm that. There was a little testing below the previous bar's close earlier in the week and a push higher later in the week. So that might account for some of the reduction in spread this week. But the close off the high is a little concerning, and you may see price once again test for supply early next week prior to any attempt to push higher. Silver price futures. Silver price futures moved higher with an increased spread this week and a positive close right up near the bar's high. Volume was slightly reduced, but it was about average overall, and there was some testing for supply below the previous bar's close prior to the push higher. This market's a little bit stronger this week than gold was, and this week's bar does suggest the market really wants to go higher. It's showing some intent. That doesn't mean there couldn't be a test for supply earlier in the week, next week. And if that occurs and selling pressure is found to be low, you'll probably see this market attempt to continue higher. Light crude price futures. Light crude price futures did not see any downside follow through in response to last week's trading, and instead the market did reverse up and close back within the trading range it's been in for some time now. It wasn't a strong move at all. It was just a rejection of moving lower, at least for this week. The market closed well off the week's high, so there is supply in the market, although volume was below the average. It was slightly increased, but it was below the average. So we're not talking about overwhelming supply. This market's trading sideways in a trading range. It's reluctant to move lower. It'll do so if it has to, but it's reluctant to move lower, and the market's attempting to defend against supply. Into the currencies now. This is the Euro-US dollar currency pair. This market traded sideways again this week, almost the exact inverse of the US dollar. Price is trading within this down bar's range and just above that bar's close. It's lackluster trading at best at the moment, with the market showing very little intent. We'll see what the pound's doing. This is the British pound. It's moved up with a narrow spread this week and closed right at this level. Spread was narrow this week, and it really wasn't showing any great deal of intent. Next chart is the Japanese yen currency futures. They've also moved sideways this week in a very similar fashion to the US dollar. Volume was slightly increased and a little above the average. Mid-bar close show a balance or equilibrium has been found, at least for this week, in the market, with a balance between the buyers and the sellers. No great intent being shown in this market either. Very quiet, lackluster trading. Often when that happens, you'll see a complete change in temperament and an expansion in range at some point in the future. So we'll wait for that to happen. At this point, the market's moving sideways. Next chart is Aussie dollar currency futures. They did move higher this week, standing up tall and proud on an increase in volume and above average volume. This was a serious change in sentiment in the market by the looks. The market's also closed above that level nicely. We bring this line across. There's the next level above. And price is pushing up around the 66.5 cent level. It was actually a pretty strong move in this market this week, which has been settled around the 65 cent level for some time. So an attempt to push up and out of that level is perhaps significant. We'll just have to wait and see if it's successful yet. At this point, it's just an attempt to break out. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin futures moved higher this week. Price has found some support at this level and is attempting to move higher. The next level above comes through there. So there's a little bit of room to move. And if the markets are sound next week, I would expect this market to push up and perhaps challenge that level, at least move up to it, and then maybe test for supply. We'll see. But the market has shown some intent. It's looking like it wants to go higher right here. I expect the market will probably move up to this level next week, and we'll see if it's strong enough to issue a challenge towards it. There has been some supply drawn out of this market at that level previously, so it may take some work as it comes up to that level, and then it might need to absorb supply and trade like this for a little bit prior to any further attempt to push higher. And that's possibly what this pullback was all about, to threaten the sellers and attempt to remove the supply down here, leaving less supply up high to deal with as price attempts to move higher. That remains to be seen. Look for the market to push up to these highs next week, and then we'll see how much supply is found in the market. Back to the US dollar index futures quickly before we wrap up. Price is trading within the range of this up bar pretty comfortably. Although it looks weak, it may need some sort of catalyst to break down. Now, that catalyst could come from an interest rate change, which I think is due this week in the US. If the target interest rate is lowered next week, that may prove to be the catalyst for a push lower. There is some expected support to be found at that level, and a break below that level would be significant. That level's about 96. So watch that level. At the moment, the market's trading at 97.1. I expect any weakness would send it down to the 96, but a clear break and close below that level would certainly be significant for this market. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Back again next week. Thanks for your time. See ya.